Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjanan Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manubhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Shvapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvevarcha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Ajanalambita pujo Kanakavadato Shankirtanikapitaro Kamalayataksho Vishwambaro Dvijavaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunaravataro. Hare Krishna. So, for those who have encountered His Holiness Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj outside of ISKCON, as a friend or some casual acquaintance or through an engagement, and those who have encountered him within ISKCON, as a disciple, an inspiring disciple, a friend, a GBC, a spiritual guide, we will all attest to the grace and love of this uniquely special personality. He was a living example, a role model of what a perfect devotee should be. He was a perfect gentleman and a perfect human being. For that reason, he was the object of our veneration. For ISKCON, our worldwide community of devotees, and most especially Maharaja's followers and his disciples, today is a very painful day. It's a very painful reminder of what we've lost, really an immeasurable loss, an irreplaceable loss, so quickly and so unexpectedly. Here we are on the first anniversary of the passing of His Holiness Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj for what seems only a few moments ago. And we continue to endure this unbearable loss, the loss of the association of someone who exemplified pure devotional service. But expressed through this pain is a deep spiritual truth, that service in separation is indeed greater than personal service. We are cautioned that unless one is perfectly anxious to inquire about the way of perfection, that there's no necessity of approaching a spiritual master. Guru Krishna Prasada Pai Bhakti Lata Beach. It is only by the grace of Guru and Krishna that one can enter into devotional service. So there's no difference in devotional service that we engage every day in our lives in this material world and the devotional service rendered in Goloka Vrindavan. But on a spiritual platform where everything is absolute, there is no difference between that separation and meeting. Rather, one relishes the relationship more in separation than in meeting or than in union. We read in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the first canto of Arjuna's response to Yudhishthira Maharaja's questions about Lord Krishna leaving this world. Arjuna is speechless due to grief caused by separation from Lord Krishna. It's described that Arjuna's mouth and his heart had dried up. He could not speak. Tears of grief smeared his eyes. He was remembering Krishna's, the many occasions he had to associate with Krishna as his well-wisher, as his benefactor, as his intimate family friend, as his chariot driver. That most intimate friend who joked with him, smiled, tolerated his offenses, and how Krishna helped him cross so many obstacles. And it's described in the Bhagavatam that he was feeling intolerable separation. Then Arjuna says, I am powerless, I am left alone. My astounding power is no longer with me. Today, as we reflect on the passing of His Holiness Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj, many of us may feel like this. He was so personal, he helped so many of us shoulder very difficult times. He joked with us and charioted our lives in so many different ways. Today, many of us might feel that great sense of loss, unbearable loss. But knowing Maharaj, who is now in the eternal association of Lord Krishna, that Krishna who is the reservoir of all beauty, whose moon-like face is like the drinking vessel of all the beauty of this world. Krishna's glories exceed the number of atoms on the earth, but most of all, the Lord's pressing desire is that He wants us all to come back home, back to Godhead. So knowing Maharaj, He would want us to join Him and stay with Him forever. We have to give up, of course. To do that, we have to give up fiddling around with material nature, become spear-tipped in advancing. And these things were very important to Maharaj, that pinpoint, focused attention on devotional service. Maharaj was very committed to uniting ISKCON, strengthening ISKCON, expanding outreach, carefully nurturing and developing sweet relationships, having the capacity to forgive, and carefully relating to each other, each devotee, with very deep respect and love. Maharaj was the epitome of these aspirations. For me, his kindness and affection was overwhelming. There is actually no way of repaying the heavy debt that we owe to the spiritual master. It's not possible. But Shastra tells us the only way to do that is to preach. Vinoda Patram. Vinoda Patram means a joker, someone who makes others laugh. Some way, someone who tries to repay the spiritual master becomes a laughing stock. It's not possible to repay the spiritual master. The only way to do it is to preach. And that is what Maharaj did every day, every hour, and that is what we should do. If we want to please Maharaj and remember him, we have to follow in his footsteps. I first met Maharaj when I was in my 20s. He immediately asked me to travel with him. I should give up university and travel with him. He said, just leave everything and travel with me. And in all the 3 decades that followed, I grew to love Maharaj and appreciate him. He never once failed to reach out to me. I felt a special bond with him. I remember how he obliged my many requests by stopping midway between Durban and Johannesburg in South Africa. That's a 600-kilometer drive. And Maharaj stopped just to have a roadside simple breakfast with me. Or how he sent a disciple to fetch me from the Charles de Gaulle airport in Paris while he was in Belgium at Radadesh, just to come and have lunch with him. Maharaj had prepared the lunch, and it was spinach and rice, and he waited for me. We eventually arrived many hours later, and Maharaj was so happy, so happy. He insisted that I freshen up, but my bags were in the car that gave me the ride, so I had no towel. And Maharaj insisted that I use his towel, soft, wet towel that he had just used. After a shower and a sumptuous lunch feast, he arranged for me to be driven back to France. Now I ask you, who would do something like this? It's just unbelievable, that kindness, that love. It's just completely unbelievable. On another occasion, we were at the Shri Radharatna temple in Durban. It was a Sunday love feast program. There was over 500 devotees there, and there's a roaring kirtan that Maharaj was leading. Then, as he went around and around in the circle, he stopped and whispered in my ears that 2 guests have arrived in the temple and that I should attend to them. Of course, the kirtan was so roaring and so absorbing that I, for a moment, was still absorbed in the kirtan. Maharaj came back to me and said, "There are 2 German guests that have arrived. Can you please receive them?" So I did receive them. And later on in the evening, late in the evening, Maharaj phoned to inquire about these German guests. Now, he told me, you see, they have come to their home of their eternal father and mother, and we should receive them and welcome them back. What an elevated consciousness. Such deep love and care for somebody he only noticed from the corner of his eye, who had entered the temple room during a Sunday feast program. So now that such a personality is no more physically with us, such an exalted Vaishnava to teach us, to correct us, what do we do? Srila Narottam Das Thakur, he asks a very important question. Chadiya Vaishnava Seva Nistara Prachara Keba, that without serving the bona fide spiritual master, who's an ideal Vaishnava, who can be delivered from the clutches of Maya? Narottam is asking, who can be delivered from the clutches of Maya? Now this question is reiterated in the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam. Mahat Sevam Dwaram Ahu Vimukte. If one desires liberations from the clutches of Maya, one must associate with a pure devotee, Mahatma. Now the question is, who is a Mahatma? A Mahatma is somebody who engages in 24 hours a day in Krishna's service. Mahatma Seva will release one from sinful reactions. So that devotee who is Krishna Arpita Prana, that refers to the devotee who dedicates his life to serving Krishna. He is Narayan Parayana or Vasudev Parayana. The devotional path is his life and soul. Such a devotee is never afraid of going anywhere, even if it's to hell. So now, what do we do when it seems like we've lost that precious association? As long as the spiritual master is physically present, we are advised by our acharyas in the scripture that we should worship his body. But when the spiritual master leaves, the disciple should worship his instruction. Srila Prabhupada describes how a sincere disciple receives instructions from the Supersoul in the spiritual master's absence. And yes, provided that the devotee is pure-hearted, he gets instructions from the Supersoul. This sincere devotee is helped directly and indirectly by the spiritual master and the Supersoul. You would recall that incredible extract from the Srimad Bhagavatam where the Supersoul is speaking to the soul and says, "You gave up my company to pursue this world. We live together in the same heart. Although we live together for 1,000 years, we are still very far from our original home. So let's go home." So if we want to go back home, if we want to get Maharaja's association again, we have to obviously first plan to go back home and try our best to follow his instructions. Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj was a perfect devotee, a perfect disciple, and a perfect gentleman of the highest order. It is unbelievable that such a personality could have walked amongst us in the age and times that we live in. He followed Srila Prabhupada's instructions without hesitation. So he was a perfect instrument, perfect role model. And it's just so remarkable to reflect just how unique and perfect Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj was. So respectful, so eager to receive guests, so eager for our comfort, unshakable faith in Srila Prabhupada and the future of ISKCON. How he always loved and appreciated devotees, always compassionate, humble, very surrendered, so considerate to others' feelings. He was so always enlivened to answer questions and expose himself in any way to advance the cause of Krishna consciousness. So, being so deeply honest, always ready to share his own realization, always empowering, personally very austere and dedicated, he never fatigued to give Krishna and the holy names to others. That's why Maharaj is so dear to so many devotees across the world. Like the sages of Naim Sharanya said to Sutta Goswami, it's our good fortune to meet you. You are the captain of the ship. Help us cross this ocean of Kali. So it's our good fortune to have got the association and example of such an exalted Vaishnava Guru in our lifetimes. The disciple should unhesitatingly think about the instructions of the Guru and not allow himself to be disturbed by anything else. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary in the Bhagavad Gita, text 41 in chapter 2, he makes the point that the order of the spiritual master is the life and substance of the disciple. Life and substance of the disciple. And at this time we can also reflect on the sacred words of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in this regard, who made a very powerful statement. He said, if to carry the command of the Vaishnava Guru, I have to be arrogant and brutish, or suffer eternal perdition, I am prepared to welcome such eternal damnation, and even sign a contract to that effect. I will not listen to the world's words of malicious persons in lieu of the command of Srila Gurudev. I will dissipate with indomitable courage and conviction the current of thoughts of the rest of the world, relying on the strength derived from the lotus feet of Sri Gurudev. I confess to this arrogance. Hare Krishna. So here we have it, the importance of carrying the command of the spiritual master. Even if we feel some handicap, some inadequacy, we've had some disagreement, we must do our best to honor the instructions given to us individually and collectively. So on this very auspicious day, on the disappearance anniversary of Srila Bhakti Charu Maharaj, I first of all offer my prostrated obeisances to each of Maharaja's disciples across the globe. You carry the hope of everything Maharaj desired and aspired for. And I offer my heartfelt gratitude and respects to my ever-well-wisher, His Holiness Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, who had unflinching devotion to Srila Prabhupada and Krishna, who came to us by Srila Prabhupada's grace and has returned again to be in the shelter of Srila Prabhupada and Lord Krishna, and who is patiently waiting for us to again join him in the association of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol, Hare Krishna.